Welcome back, you filthy last Epoch players. So, I wanted to try out a minion build, but I didn't want to play Necromancer, and I didn't want to play Primalist like what everybody else is doing, running Wolves or Squirrels or whatever. I wanted to use this guy, and this is Manifest Armour. Now, the other thing that I wanted to use was I wanted to use Forged Strike and then summon an army of forged weapons, including one being an axe, and then basically have them basically dish out a metric ton of damage. Now, this build I've taken to empowered monoliths, so I'll be farming on stream empowered monoliths. And as far as it goes at this stage, you know, considering the gear on this is pretty moderate, like I haven't really done any major upgrades or anything like that. There's a lot of development that can go into this build to make it better. This is doing respectable levels of damage in every possible way. Now, there's a couple of things that you'll also notice, and this was mentioned in stream the other night, which was, why don't you use Jungle Queen's Chaps of Holding? This is really interesting because this build actually uses a node on the tree called Infinite Bulwark, which increases armor on potion usage, which I currently get 60% and I'll level up to 100%. And then this also provides me increased damage reduction, because one of the things about this build that's really cool, and especially on the Forge Master, is or the Forge Guard, is that you get a ton of armor based on damage taken. So as I get hit and as I take more damage and as I pop potions, I have a ton of armor, which gives me anywhere it caps out at about 5,500 at the current point, and I intend with level 85 and 86 gear and better crafted gear to get it to like 10,000 armor, which would be really cool because it basically make my character god tier. And I should have no issues farming infinite arenas with this build, considering it's a minion build and we're at level 80, so we still got 20 levels to go. So for all intents and purposes, this is an armor stacker, and this is even more prevalently important because of this node here, Force of Impact. Your manifest armor gains merely physical damage equal to a proportion of the armor on your body armor, which affects your body armor stats, yes, but it means that we can juice up our armor, get a huge amount of defense, and we also can use armor on our body armor to then stack up more offense from our minion. And at this stage, also on top of that, overall my minion just doesn't die because I focused on armor in every possible way. I also have idols which proc up more armor, vitality, and then the other thing is this opens up the argument of conversion of elemental damage to physical, because we've got so much armor and our highest stat, and this is the same concept of armor stacking as like in PoE. Our highest stat for damage reduction is going to be armor. If we're converting our elemental damage with our elemental ailments capped out where possible, then that means that we're actually going to be mitigating, you know, whatever the total damage cap is that the armor is doing for a percentage of our elemental damage, which is going to uplift our damage reduction overall. That's the concept of armor stacking, more or less. If you're a PoE player, you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, beyond that point, basically we summon a minion of an army of Forge Strike minions, and they follow me around with my Manifest Armor following me around. Now there's a couple of other interactions in this build too, so I also use Sigil of Power. This procs up your damage from your minions and your health regeneration, so the more sigils, the more damage your minions do. And also Healing Hands is OP because you can perpetually heal your minions, so basically, and yourself, so basically you've got as many pots as you want to pop. And the other advantage of running that armor as well is, well, actually in this skill tree, so you have increased armor and chance to find potions if you have used a potion recently. And so the more potions that I pop, if I've got this leveled at level 5 on bosses, I can just perpetually pop potions all day long and let my minions do their job and just kite and dodge and do whatever I need to, which means drawn out fights on really hard bosses actually, and this is what my theory here is when I get into corruption farming, shouldn't be too difficult because basically I have infinite pots and I have infinite healing from Healing Hands, and I can keep my minions alive the entire time in the fight. So basically really strong, all the advantages of Paladin with all the advantages of being essentially a heavy armor necromancer, and then mitigates a ton of damage in the process of that. So the other things too, improvements, I'm going to be pushing my my total HP cap up, and then basically we're just going to be a walking tank with an army of tank minions, and that's basically the idea behind the build. Anyway, let's get into the gearing and talk about the items in this build. Okay, so armor in this build's really important. In particular, your gloves, your chest, your boots, and your helm. And then weapon is also extremely important because the way that the Forge Guard works, or the Manifest Armor works, is it takes the stats and amplifies them from all of your armor. So minions also get 50% reduced inbound damage, but then it also takes any stats, including damage buffs, movement buffs, anything like that from your armor and applies that to your Manifest Armor to make a juicy tanky, singly, like, crazily OP minion. And beyond this point, the Titan Sword's one of the most important areas of this tree at this stage because essentially this means your equipped sword, or in this case, your equipped weapon, it then amplifies into damage that your minion's sword that it gets equipped from this node does moving forwards. So in that case, I did a fair bit of research and I realized that Apathy's More for now is probably the best in socket. Now, at this stage, this isn't a legendary item. It doesn't have legendary potential, but gives you physical damage, minion damage, melee void damage, 100% chance to proc Doom, void penetration with Doom, 78% melee damage, and melee leech as well. Whether or not it has an effect, I'm not entirely sure with minions yet. So this is really going to juice up your Manifest Armor's damage. Now, beyond that, your helm, you want to go like +4 Manifest Armor, and ideally my chest piece, I want to throttle up armor on this as well, and there are some really cool level 85, level 86 high armor chest pieces. And you basically want to focus on all your defensive stats, and or if you can get Forge Strike plus level to Forge Strikes. And the level for the total, like, best in socket roll for plus Manifest Armor is going to be +4 if you can get it. And then basically any other stats that you can get to proc up armor. So this helm is not best, and this is just a really, like, I wouldn't say cheap one that I could get, but it's one that I could easily afford early on to get my minion level up so I could allocate more points in the tree, and that's basically where you want to keep it. So yeah, we want basically throttle out armor on chest piece, throttle out armor on helm, and we want +4 to Manifest Armor if we can get it. And then on the chest, we want to try and get +4 to Forge Strike, which is going to increase the amount of points you can allocate for your Forge Striking, which would just increase your damage as an overall and your ability to proc ignites and things like that. And then it's a circular, you just get more damage out of that situation. Now, amulet-wise, minion health if you can get it, any other resistance stats you can get it, flat health, and you also can get a minion amulet with implicits with increased minion damage and crit strike chance. Ideally, that's the best one to get. And any mana regen that you can get on this is even better, and health regeneration as well, just to keep you in the fight. This one is not a very good amulet, but I will be farming to get a better one. Now, beyond that, rings, I've got a really good ring here. So implicits are all minion stats, and then minion damage and 104% increased minion health. Just really bad resistance rolls on it. Now, belt-wise, the reason why I can have up to 16 pots is because I use Jungle Queen's Chaps of Holding, which gives me 16 potions. And we ignore the dodge stat out of the potions, but we do get an increase in minion physical damage, which can max roll out at about 50% if you get essentially a T1 roll on it. Beyond that point, we also want to use Ribbons of Blood. This is going to give you percentage health, and this caps out at 10%. And it also means that a percentage of minion melee damage is leached as health on hit back to you, as far as I'm aware, and minions get increased leech rate, and you just get straight plus physical melee damage to minions, and it also makes your minions crit immune. So it means that, they can't die to crazy crit, so they essentially get crit avoidance. So yeah, it keeps your minions alive, which is why, like, my Manifest Armor doesn't easily die. Takes a hell of a lot to take it down now, and yeah, my minions stay in the fight for longer. In particular, my forged weapons, which you would expect to die really quickly. Well, if they're not copping crits, then they're dying. So yeah, really basic stuff. This would be like best in socket ring. I use this in this particular build, this belt. You can use a different belt, like something like this, which is like minion damage, health to you, and then if you can get implicits for minion life and or minion life rolls, that's going to be also a preference. But I think it's just cool being able to run Jungle Queen's Chaps on this build. I may switch it out, I may not entirely sure yet. For gloves, I managed to get some decent gloves with 195% minion health. And then also bearing in mind, these stats are amplified on the Manifest Armor by a certain percentage. I think it was like 240%. So that's helmet, and then we want gloves. Yeah, 240% stat amplification, which basically means these stats on this are going to amp up my manifest armor, so you don't want any less than this, so it gets increased attack speed, increased health, and resistances, armor, and endurance. And the same with boots. So I have increased health and increased movement speed boots with increased armor. By no means are these best in socket. There can be way better boots you can put on this build, but for now this is doing the job. And I also had a code of an erased sentinel that gave me +1 to sentinel skills, armor, flat armor, and mitigates 28% of armor. Also mitigates damage over time, so it deals with dot. So this build's not weak to dot as well. It can handle it like a champ, as well as having 2 sources of constant regeneration, and then a buff that regenerates me and my minions as well at the same time. So ultimately, you can stay in the fight for quite some time. Now, as far as the idols, I really just went for like a predominantly vitality and increased armor where you could get it. As you can see, that's my rolls, and any other flat armor because I'm trying to stack armor. And then I also have elements converted to physical, so cold, nearly 20% of cold damage is converted to physical, and then any other damage rolls that I could get to minions as well to buff up minion damage as well. So my manifest armor, for example, does void damage thanks to my apathies more. So I throttled that up. And then beyond that, I've just filled that in with like increased healing effectiveness and minion physical damage rolls and just increased flat HP. Just to try and get my health pool up a bit more as well, and I'll continue to progress that through the tree. But that's basically it for the gearing. It's not like a crazy hard build to gear. You're going to be really focused towards armor and minion stats, but it's definitely very different and probably not the conventional way to gear up, especially with axe like this, which is just bizarre. Like, and this, funnily enough, also throttles up my forge strike, so I do a bit of damage. And I do a fair bit of damage with my Void Cleave as well. So you would have seen the B-roll. I like whip through enemies and just wipe out packs. And we'll see how we go with empowered monoliths moving forwards on this one with that one too. But anyway, that's basically the gearing on this one. Now for skill tree setups, we take Manifest Armor. We're going to level up into Plate Mail initially and Force of Impact. This will make your minion a lot tankier. Beyond that point, we want to focus on going into Iron Grasp and then throttling up into Redistributed Steel and into Titan Sword. This is going to increase your damage, as I mentioned earlier in the video. Then beyond that, we want to go Great Helm and take Whirlwind. This is going to let your minion spin to win. And then finally, we're going to level up Steel Greaves. Now in the Forge Strike, we want to basically rush into getting all of our minion nodes early, or all of our forged weapon nodes early. So we go into Forge by Fire, then into Mass Production, then into Forge Master, so we get a big kick-ass axes running around the field, and they do a lot more AoE. And then we go and get well-forged weapons, and then we want to scale up into Light Forge, and then into Beneath Solarum. This is going to mean that you do no longer have a cooldown reduction parameter around your Forge Strike, which means you just need to manage your mana at this stage. And in the next video I'll put out, which will be more min-maxed, will be leveled enough to be able to deal with the mana issue currently, because you just have to balance the way that you spend mana, like with most of the builds in last Epoch. And then lastly, you go into Heavy Strike once you max this out. The next skill you're going to take is going to be Sigils of Hope. This is once you unlock more in the Paladin tree. Beyond this, before this point, you can get Ring of Shields, and that's going to give you a lot more defensiveness initially. But ideally, you're going to want to put skill points into the Paladin tree, because this is going to buff you up. Beyond that point, then you're going to take Empowering Sigils into Word of Alacrity, and then Exigency, which will be instant cast for your sigils, and then basically increase and buff all the damage across the board for your minions, and, well, yourself, but it doesn't really matter about yourself. Minions is what you want to buff up. And then we're going to go Invigorate, then we're going to go Quiet Mind and Polygram, which means we can stack up a ton of sigils, and then that's per sigil. That's going to buff up your damage on all your minions, and that's going to help your build do more damage. Now, beyond that, we need to get Void Cleave. Now, we need to also bear in mind that we want to level up and get to Scorching Path. This means that your Molten Infusion, which comes from Molten Blades, is going to proc up when you hit an enemy, and your minions are going to do more damage. And then beyond that, I also have Blazing Steel, which just increases my damage. And then beyond that, I've also got Gravity's Edge, which means that it basically turns into a travel skill, which is going to make you be able to use it as a sort of progression skill through maps. because I don't have any other lunge or any other skills like that in this build. This is how we compensate for that. And then finally go into Armor Sunderer, and then this is going to mean that when you do hit any enemy with Void Cleave, you're going to shred armor and apply shred stacks, and then that's also going to allow your minions to do more damage to enemies like bosses and things like that. So you're going to basically go in, Void Cleave, and then your minions will jump in and do a ton more damage. And the last skill finally is Healing Hands. Obviously, you're going to need the Paladin points in the Paladin tree to achieve this. And then we want to basically go up to Homeward. And this means cast that self if not casting on enemies. So you basically just need to stand in the vicinity of your allies and just keep casting. And I found this to be a lot more efficient than trying to target cast onto things. And then we come down and we get Prayer of the Fallen, we get Vow of Restoration, we get Sacred Gift. And then this just increases the chance of health globes to drop as you're playing as well when you've got it procced. And then Urgent Healing down into Font of Salvation, into Blessed Parish, and into Purity of Thought, which is going to reduce the mana cost to basically non-existent mana cost, which means you can infinitely sustain this even if you've like maxed out your pool of mana and you're in negative mana. So yeah, that's basically it for Healing Hands. Okay, so for the skill tree, you're going to start with the Sentinel skills. And then I always level up Juggernaut first. This just deals with early resistances when you're leveling up your build, and it means that you can sustain early sort of fights with early bosses and stuff without dying too much. Then we go into Fearless, then we go into Armor Clad, and then by that point we've got all the points we need in this tree. And then we're going to go into Forge Master. We're going to go Battle Harden, and this is going to increase your armor when hit by 60%. And then I'll also go Guardian. This is going to increase your max health pool. I go into Thornmail, which means damage, again, just flat increased armor, and then damage taken by attackers when hit is increased as well. So if you get hit, that then means your enemies are taking further damage as they take more damage after they hit you. Then I go into Folded Steel. And this is going to just increase your damage from forged weapons and manifest armor. So this is pretty much a must-have in the build. I also then go into Might, level that up further. I did put 2 points into Iron Attunement as well, which will eventually max out once we get to level 100. 1 point in a Flawless Defender, 1 point into Osbric's Bane, and then 3 points in a Shield Crafter, which is going to give your minions 150% minion health and 150% armor, so it's going to make your minions incredibly tanky. And it also means that you have a chance to cast Ring of Shields when you hit by 3% too, so you'll see that go off now and again if you take enough damage. And then because we're doing potion stacking with our belt, I've also got Infinite Bulwark and Liquid Iron, and this is just going to give you less damage over time taken across global dot stats, and physical damage resistance increase. And then it also means when you pop a potion, you're going to get an increase to armor up to a cap of 100%, and increased chance to find potions on potion use up to a chance of 100%, which means every time you pop a potion in a boss fight, you're going to get another potion back 100% guaranteed, which means you can sustain pots using that belt that I'm using pretty much indefinitely, which is really useful in boss fights in particular. Now in the Paladin tree, we're also going to go Defiance into 5 points there. We're going to go into Valor and then level through Holy Icon. And then once we've unlocked Holy Icon, which is I'm 1 point away from, so once we've got 5 points into that, we're gonna then level up Dedication, which is going to deal with our mana sustain issue. And it's going to mean that we're basically going to be able to fully sustain mana moving forwards up to level probably 90. So we'll put like, 9 points, or up to 91. We'll put 10 points into that as well. And then, yeah, that should be pretty straightforward stuff. That's basically how you get this working. So it's a bit of combination between the trees. No one tree's perfect. And then the final set of points we're going to allocate will be an Abyssal Endurance. And this is going to throttle out your Void Resistance as well, and make you a hell of a lot tankier, especially when you're versing certain bosses that proc Void. Okay, so this is just an initial video where we've gotten to Empowered Monoliths. I'm going to keep pushing this build and see how far I can take it. I'd say I can make it to 100. I did run some Empowered Monoliths, and it was a piece of cake. So I'm going to say this should get to like 200 minimum, but I want to see how far I can push, and I want to see how good this is in Infinite Arena, because I actually think this would be a perfect arena pushing build. Anyway, if you're looking for a different type of minion build, check this one out. The build planner will be in the description below. So if you want to grab that, have a look and see, and then make your own version of this, go crazy. But anyway, until next time, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. Don't forget to follow the Twitch, and I'll see you guys next time.